I think we are about right here. So we just got done talking about how conveniently Gatsby gets a phone call and it leaves Nick and Meyer Wolfsheim alone together. And Wolfsheim starts talking about Gatsby. It gives him this chance to be sort of unfiltered because Gatsby's not there. It would be kind of awkward to talk about somebody when they're right next to you. So this gives him a chance to be unfiltered and to talk about Gatsby. And this is what he says. He says, "Fine fellow, isn't he, Gatsby? Handsome to look at and a perfect gentleman. He's an Oxford man. I knew I had discovered a man of breeding after I talked with him for an hour. Gatsby is very careful about women. He would never so much look at a friend's wife." Like, what is Wolfsheim supposed to be doing here? Based on everything that he's saying. Notice how he is sort of talking him up. He's calling him a perfect gentleman. He is sort of confirming that Gatsby really did go to Oxford, even though people doubt that from him. Here's a third party saying, no, it's true. I think really what cracks me up about this is the last line, that Gatsby is very careful about women and he would never so much look at a friend's wife, because isn't that exactly what he's going to ask Nick to do? Like, he's going to ask Nick to set him up with Daisy, who's married. And I suppose somebody could argue that Tom isn't his friend, but still, it's sort of a creepy thing to ask. And so it's always interesting to me to sort of see this. And, you know, if Nick can like clearly see that Wolfsheim is sort of a shady guy, the funny thing about it is Gatsby can't. Gatsby sees Wolfsheim and he sees success. He sees this man who has a lot of money and he can do anything he wants and he has this power, but he doesn't understand that there are degrees to success, or there's degree to sort of social status. He just thinks money is the thing that gets you there. So he can't tell that being a gangster and earning your money by, robbing people is different than earning your money by working hard for it, which is different than earning your money by inheriting it. And all of those things mean different things, especially in this book, the idea of old money versus new money and how you got it and how you came across it. And Gatsby can't make the distinction, but Nick can. Nick sees Wolfsheim and is like, yeah, sure, he's rich and he's sort of powerful, but he's a gangster. And so it's always interesting to me that he would use Wolfsheim to sort of like speak on his character when Wolfsheim's not a great character. So that's, once Gatsby comes back from getting his telephone call, Wolfsheim leaves because he's really only there to do that, to talk him up. And I'm not sure I like having Wolfsheim tell you that he went to Oxford with G's instead of an X really adds to the credibility of who Gatsby is. And then something sort of crazy happens. Tom appears. And Gatsby's not expecting this at all. He knows who Tom is, right? He's been following Daisy for 5 years. He knows that Tom is her husband. And so he gets in this situation where he has to be introduced to Tom. He knows who Tom is. Tom doesn't know who he is. And he hasn't really planned for this. And so look at what happens. And Nick says, come along with me. I've got to introduce you to someone. And he introduces them. This is Mr. Gatsby, Mr. Buchanan. And look at what Gatsby does. They shook hands briefly, and a strained, unfamiliar look of embarrassment came over Gatsby's face. I turned toward Mr. Gatsby, but he was no longer there. So Gatsby gets himself in a situation that's unexpected. And instead of doing the things that we would expect from him, like charming Tom, like turning on his smile, he runs away. And that is telling about who Gatsby is and how he's going to react to things in the future. I mean, think back to chapter 1. Things were not going Daisy's way. Like, Tom's mistress, Myrtle, called every 5 minutes and she was losing control, because this book isn't necessarily a love story so much as it is a book about control. Like, who has it, who wants it, how do they get it, and how long do they have it? So if you think back to chapter 1, Daisy completely loses control because Tom's mistress keeps calling on the phone. So what does she do? She takes Nick out to the garden and she tells him the sob story about her daughter being born. Tom loses a little bit of control when Myrtle sort of steps up to him in chapter 2. And what does Tom do? He slaps her across the face. So Tom and Daisy, whenever they sort of are in a position where it's unexpected or they're losing control, they kind of rely back to their power. Like Daisy has her voice, she can talk people into things. Tom has his physicality, but Gatsby, you would think he would do his, which would be to charm. Like he would try to charm Tom, but he doesn't. He runs away, and I think that's pretty telling to what's going to happen in the future. Oh, going backwards here. Yikers. So now we're sort of at this point where we are getting to finally hear what that secret was. Remember at the end of chapter 3, Jordan was like, I have a secret, I have a secret. And so she's about to tell this secret, and it's about Daisy's past. So I think we should read it. I have my book here. I'm clearly not pre-planned that. Holy cannoli. Let me search. Ooh, not chapter 4, but that'll work. We're just going to read a little bit about the story of when Daisy was younger. Okay. We're going to start right up here, one afternoon in 1917. All right, so follow along with me. It says, one October day in 1917, said Jordan Baker that afternoon, sitting up very straight on a straight chair in the tea garden at the Plaza Hotel. I was walking along from one place to another, half on the sidewalks and half on the lawns. I was happier on the lawns because I had on shoes from England with rubber knobs on the soles that bit into the soft ground. I had on a new plaid skirt also that blew in the wind a little, and whenever this happened, the red, white, and blue banners in front of all the houses stretched out stiff and said t-t-t-t-t-t in a disapproving way. The largest of the banners and the largest of the lawns belonged to Daisy Fay's house. She was just 18, 2 years older than me, and by far the most popular of all the young girls in Louisville. She dressed in white and had a little white roadster, and all day long the telephone rang in her house, and excited young officers from Camp Taylor demanded the privilege of monopolizing her for that night, anyways for an hour. When I came opposite her house that morning, her white roadster was beside the curb, and she was sitting in it with a lieutenant I had never seen before. They were so engrossed in each other that she didn't see me until I was 5 feet away. "Hello, Jordan," she called out unexpectedly. "Please come here." I was flattered that she wanted to speak to me because of all the older girls I admired her most. She asked me if I was going to the Red Cross and make bandages. I was. Well, then, would I tell them that she couldn't come that day? The officer looked at Daisy while she was speaking in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at sometime. And because it seemed romantic to me, I've remembered the incident ever since. His name was Jay Gatsby. And I didn't lay eyes on him again for over 4 years. Even after I'd met him on Long Island, I didn't realize it was the same man. That was 1917. By the next year, I had a few beaux myself, and I began to play in tournaments, so I didn't see Daisy very often. She went with the slighter, older crowd when she went with anyone at all. Wild rumors were circulating about her, how her mother had found her packing her bag one winter night to go to New York and say goodbye to a soldier who was going overseas. She was effectively prevented, but she wasn't on speaking terms with her family for several weeks. I think we should think about what's happening here. So, who must be that soldier that Daisy's going to say goodbye to? It has to be Gatsby, right? And why would her parents stop her from going? And I want you to sort of think about it, especially in wartime. What would sometimes happen is women would go say goodbye to a soldier and they would end up getting married. They would marry this person. Or they would say goodbye to a soldier and then all of a sudden they would have a child. So that goodbye was not always as innocent as it might seem to be. And Daisy is from a very wealthy family. She is like the wealthiest family in her city. So her parents want to protect that wealth. They don't know this person. They want to protect her reputation. They want to protect her future. And so they stop her from going. Okay. After that, she didn't play around with soldiers anymore, but only a few flat-footed, short-sighted young men in town who couldn't get into the army at all. By the next autumn, she was gay again, gay as ever. She had a debut after the armistice, and in February she was presumably engaged to a man from New Orleans. In June, she married Tom Buchanan of Chicago with more pomp and circumstance than Louisville ever knew before. He came down with 100 people in 4 private cars and hired a whole floor of the Seelbach Hotel. The day before the wedding, he gave her a string of pearls valued at $350,000. Ooh, that is expensive even in today's age. I was a bridesmaid. I came into her room half an hour before the bridal dinner, found her lying on the bed as lovely as the June night in her flowered dress, and as drunk as a monkey. She had a bottle of Santorin in one hand and a letter in the other. "Gratulate me," she muttered. "Never had a drink before, but oh, how I do enjoy it." "What's the matter, Daisy?" I was scared, I can tell you. I'd never seen a girl like that before. "Here, dearies." She groped around in the wastebasket she had with her on the bed and pulled out the string of pearls. "Take 'em downstairs and give 'em back to whoever they belong to. Tell 'em Daisy's changed her mind. Say, Daisy's changed her mind." She began to cry. She cried and cried, and I rushed out and found her mother's maid, and we locked the door and into the cold bath. She wouldn't let go of the letter. She took it into the tub with her and squeezed it up into a wet ball and only let me leave it in the soap dish when she saw that it was coming to pieces like snow. Ooh, I love that simile. So, come on, who's that letter from? It's gotta be Gatsby. And what does it say? It has to say, like, "I love you. I'm coming back. Just wait for me. Wait for me." To make her like this, I mean, it has to say that. All right. But she didn't say another word. We gave her spirits of ammonia and put ice on her forehead and hooked her back into her dress, and half an hour later we walked out of the room with the pearls around her neck, and the incident was over. The next day at 5 o'clock she married Tom Buchanan without so much as a shiver and started off on a 3 months trip to the South Seas. I saw them in Santa Barbara when they came back, and I thought I'd never seen a girl so mad about her husband. If he left the room for a minute, she'd look around uneasily and say, "Where'd Tom gone?" And wear the most abstracted expression until she saw him coming in the door. She used to sit on the sand with his head in her lap by the hour, rubbing her fingers over his eyes and looking at him with unfathomable delight. It was touching to see them together. Made you laugh in a hushed, fascinated way. That was in August. So, the big question is, did Daisy love Tom? I mean, I know we're sort of on the fence about whether or not she loves him now, but did she love him when she married him? I think she did. Sure sounds like it. It sounds like she was madly in love with him. And look at what happens. A week after I left Santa Barbara, Tom ran into a wagon on Ventura Road one night and ripped a front wheel off the car. The girl who was with him got into the papers too because her arm was broken. She was one of the chambermaids in the Santa Barbara hotel. Okay, wait, excuse me? Why is Tom with a chambermaid and that's like a cleaning lady? Tom, like the wealthiest person anybody has ever met. Why is he with a cleaning lady? The only reason he would be with her is if he was having an affair with her. And so not only does Daisy find out that Tom is having an affair, but so does every other person because it's in the newspaper. And everybody knows the only reason why Tom would be with a chambermaid is if he was having an affair with her. How humiliated would you be if you were Daisy? How angry? What would it make you want to do when you find this out? Think about that. The next April, Daisy had a little girl, and they went to France for a year. I saw them one spring in Cannes and later in Deweyville, and they came back to Chicago to settle down. We're going to skip forward a little bit. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she heard the name Gatsby for the first time in years. It was when I asked you. Do you remember? If you knew Gatsby in West Egg? After you had gone home, she came into my room and woke me up and said, "What Gatsby?" And when I described him, I was half asleep. She said in the strangest voice that it must be the man she used to know. It wasn't until then that I connected this Gatsby with the officer in her white car. Skip forward. Nick now. "It was a strange coincidence," I said. "But it wasn't a coincidence at all." "Why not?" "Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be just across the bay." Then it had not merely been the stars to which he had aspired on that June night. He came alive to me, delivered suddenly from the womb of his purposeless splendor. And he wants to know, continued Jordan, if you'll invite Daisy to your house some afternoon and then let him come over. And so we finally get it, right? We finally get what the big secret is and what Gatsby wants. He wants to meet up with Daisy, to have this tea with Daisy. And let's talk about that a little more. We're going to kind of go back over here. Nope, over here. Go up here. Okay. I think the big question is like, why does Gatsby ask Jordan to ask Nick to ask Daisy to tea? Like, why doesn't Gatsby just ask Daisy himself? Like, he knows where she lives. Can he just like send an invite over? And why does he make Jordan ask Nick? Why does he just ask Nick? Didn't he have that party for him? So there's a lot of weird questions. And I always think of it this way, like, who is more likely to do a favor for Gatsby? Is it Jordan, a woman who might like see the romantic possibilities and what's happening? Or is it Nick, some guy he doesn't even know? It's probably Jordan. And who's more likely to do a favor? Is it, is Nick going to do a favor for Gatsby, a guy he doesn't know? Or Jordan, the girl he's trying to sleep with? I'm going to guess Jordan. And now Daisy, she's probably going to be more likely to do this favor for Nick because, I hate to say it, but Nick is a man. And so he comes at this time in the 20s, he comes with this like sense of dependability. And so almost like if Nick says it's okay, like as a man, and says that she can meet with this other man, it like gives some credibility to the request. Like maybe he's really looking out for her. Whereas Jordan could just be getting swept up into the romance. So it's very calculated the way Gatsby has done this. And do you notice that Nick goes to tea or goes to this like evening thing with Jordan the same day that he has a lunch with Meyer Wolfsheim? That's not a coincidence. Gatsby is like pretty manipulating in that way. Like he really likes to plan out all of the things that happen, which is, in some ways it's like kind of romantic, and then in other ways it's a little bit stalkerish. Like I'm kind of seesawing back and forth between the two.